He was just the janitor invisible in the hallways of power. She was the CEO, distant, untouchable, and drowning in silence, and the boy between them. He hadn't spoken a single word in years, but one ordinary morning, in a building full of glass and noise, something unexpected happened, and none of them would ever be the same again. It started with the sound of shoes. Not just any shoes, but the sharp rhythmic clack of stilettos slicing through polished marble, echoing with authority down the 37th floor of Lancaster Industries. A floor where no one ever paused, no one ever whispered, and certainly no one ever noticed the janitor. Mark Dawson bent over his mop, wringing out the last bit of water with slow, practiced care. He didn't look up. He never did. Not when executives swept by in tailored suits, not when assistants barked into headsets, and definitely not when Arden Lancaster herself strode past with a look that could freeze a summer storm. Mark didn't mind. Being invisible had its benefits. Until today. Until the moment a child's scream shattered the glass and steel silence of the top floor. It wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't a cry for attention. It was pure, unfiltered terror, raw and animalistic, the kind that made even the most hardened boardroom veterans freeze in place. A boy, maybe 8, had crumpled to the floor outside the executive conference room, fists clenched, chest-heaving, face red from the force of his own voice. A nervous-looking assistant hovered nearby, trying and failing to soothe him with empty words and outstretched hands. But the boy, Leo, though Mark didn't know that yet, was beyond words. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the echo of voices too sharp, the towering windows, the humming printers, the constant buzz of tension in the air, it was too much, and everyone could feel it. Except no one moved. No one. Except the janitor. Mark didn't rush. He didn't speak. He didn't ask permission. He simply reached into the pocket of his utility apron and pulled out a nearly empty bottle of glass cleaner. And then, quietly, carefully, he turned it upside down and blew. A bubble. Tiny, iridescent, imperfect. It wobbled out of the nozzle like a secret and drifted into the artificial air, catching the harsh light in a shimmer of blue and violet. The boy froze. His scream died mid-breath. His eyes tracked the floating orb like it was the only thing anchoring him to the world. And when the bubble popped with a soft kiss of silence, the child let out a shaky breath and stopped crying. The assistant blinked. So did everyone else. Mark crouched beside the boy, careful not to touch him, and blew another, then another. 3 bubbles. That's all it took. The boy stared at the janitor, eyes wide. His fingers, previously clawed into fists, relaxed ever so slightly. His breathing slowed. And that's when she appeared. Arden Lancaster stood in the hallway framed by glass and power. Her heels had stopped clicking. Her arms were folded, her jaw set. Her assistant had paged her from the meeting. Something about her son. Something about a meltdown. Something urgent. But Arden hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to find her son, her brilliant, troubled, beautiful son, kneeling quietly on the hallway floor, entranced by a bottle of glass cleaner and a man in a faded blue uniform. And she definitely hadn't expected to see Leo reach out and take that man's hand. For a moment, no one spoke, and then Arden's voice, sharp as ever, sliced through the stillness. "What do you think you're doing?" Mark stood slowly. He didn't release the boy's hand. Leo held on too tightly. "I was just trying to help, Mark," said his voice low and calm. "You're not qualified to help," she snapped. Her assistant stepped forward. "Miss Lancaster." "I take him," Arden said, nodding at the boy. "Get him to the private room on 38. Now." But Leo didn't move. His small hand clung to Mark's. Arden's gaze dropped just for a second and her voice faltered. "Leo, come with Mommy." Leo shook his head. The janitor, she didn't even know his name, crouched again and whispered something. She couldn't hear what it was, but she saw the boy look at him, and then at her. He let go of Mark's hand. Arden's shoulders dropped a fraction as the assistant carefully led Leo away. Mark remained kneeling, staring down at the popped bubble on the floor. When he rose, Arden's eyes locked onto his. They were gray-blue, tired, not defiant, not ashamed, just steady. "What's your name?" she asked. "Mark Dawson. I assume you're contracted through facilities." "Yes, ma'am." She paused. "Finish mopping this floor, then report to security." Mark nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He didn't flinch. He didn't explain. He just went back to his mop, moving with the same quiet grace he always had. Arden turned heels, clicking once more. But something in her chest twisted as she walked away, because for the first time in months, maybe years, her son had reached out for someone. And it wasn't her. The security office smelled like old coffee and wet carpet. Mark sat on a worn plastic chair in the corner, hands folded neatly in his lap. He wasn't cuffed. He wasn't under arrest. But he might as well have been. The way the assistant manager glared at him from behind the desk felt like an accusation in itself. Across the room, two security guards whispered to each other behind a cracked monitor. One of them kept glancing back at Mark like he might explode or run. But Mark didn't move. He'd been still for years. A heavy-set man with thinning hair and an ill-fitting blazer finally broke the silence. "Dawson, right, Mark Dawson." "Yes, sir." The man sniffed, flipping through a few papers with more drama than necessary. "Facilities contract says you've been here 8 months. No complaints until now." Mark gave a polite nod. "You were told to avoid executive floors unless scheduled. You're assigned to floors 19 through 35. So, what were you doing?" "On 37, I was filling in," Mark said simply. "The regular janitor for that level called out sick. Dispatch sent me up." "Convenient," the man muttered. "And the CEO's son just happened to be there." Mark stayed silent. There were things worth explaining. And then there were moments best left to speak for themselves. The man leaned forward, folding his hands. "Mr. Dawson, do you realize the liability here? You approached the child of a major executive without clearance. What if something had gone wrong? What if she files a formal complaint?" Mark met his eyes, voice calm. "I didn't touch the boy. I just blew a bubble." The man stared. Then, as if that explanation was too ridiculous to bother with, he waved a hand. "You'll be written up. We'll see if facilities keeps you on." "Wait here." The door opened behind him. Sophie Chen stepped in. She didn't knock, didn't wait to be acknowledged. She walked in like she belonged in every room she entered because she usually did. Sophie, the manager, said, surprised, "You didn't need to come down here." "I did," she replied, "and you can go. I'll take it from here, but HR oversight. Contracted staff are under my jurisdiction. Please." The man hesitated, then stood and shuffled out his ego, bruised but still intact. Sophie waited for the door to close before turning to Mark. She didn't sit. She just stood across from him, her arms crossed not out of hostility but thoughtfulness, studying him. "I saw the report," she said. "Then I asked for your file." Mark said nothing. She held up a thin folder. "There's almost nothing in here. No education history, no references. Just a note that you declined to provide prior employment verification." She raised an eyebrow. "You're not who you say you are you?" Mark let out a quiet breath. "I never said who I was. I just took the job." "Right." Sophie's voice softened. "That kid, Leo. He's not easy. Arden's tried half the specialists in Boston, and he reached for you, like he's known you for years." Mark looked down at the floor. It wasn't anything. He just needed something simple, something quiet. "Glass cleaner and bubbles," she asked. His mouth lifted just barely. Kids don't care what it's called. They care how it feels. Sophie was quiet for a beat. "I used to teach," she said finally. "Special education. Before HR. I know what I saw, and what I saw upstairs wasn't an accident." She paused, then stepped closer. I don't know what happened to you, but I think you've been helped.